You gotta swing, Carl. You gotta swing.
Oh, Austin doesn't want to swing. He wants to be swung.
I can't help this.
Back up a little bit.
Oh my God.
Believe me, he tried.
Oh my gosh.
Push off, Peg. No, don't get us going faster. Come on. Is this second one?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Survive.
These people came down. What happened is Colonia Juarez.
Oh, baby!
Is there a helmet? Am I supposed to put on a helmet?
Yeah. Yes, your bow will protect you. Oh, that's good, Austin. Spin her backwards.
I think the most dangerous part is getting out. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Am I that fast? Okay, if I throw up and pee my pants, they'll feel it.
Hey, those are not Sunday appropriate activities, Rube.
That's what the drainage holes are for. In the sea, let's get over there and
Wow!
What's the problem, Lynn? Higher! Higher!
All the way back.
You did it work for me!
Austin, go help your mother out. I'm sure she's not going to be able to get out.
Yeah, because I don't want...
But it wasn't until 1926 that one of the presidents, and I don't remember his name right now, he imposed the law. Well, and actually that cost a little blood, as well as a lot of missionaries, a lot of priests for the Catholic Church, because there were a lot of them from Portugal and Italy and where have you, Spain. Our small mission corps were all non-colony born, non-Mexico born, including the mission president. So from 1926 until 1934, our church didn't have a mission in Mexico. In 1934, they established the mission again with a president who had been born in Colonia Juarez. It so happened, I didn't know a thing about it at the time, but eventually he became my father-in-law. Harold W. Pratt was the first mission president down there. The local people said, no, it's time now for a native mission president. They made it quite an issue. There were no other doctrinal problems. There were no other doctrinal concern. They had had various conventions, but it was the so-called Tercera convention who they made a distinct decision. We're not going to put up with this president. I should have said, we want a laymanite president. Well, of course, they don't dictate who their president's going to be. So President Pratt had orders to excommunicate most of these leaders. There were about 6 or 8 of them. They took with them.
I fire you.
Initially, they took with them quite a chunk of the membership. Many of whom realized what has happened and came back. But I shouldn't put out a number, but I'll say 1,000, 1,500. Well, my mission president, he was very good with working with people. And one of the things that he did was he finally started working with them, the leaders, the excommunicated leaders. He finally made a reconciliation, as it were, and President George Albert Smith went down to this conference. It was a mission conference, and nullified the excommunication. That's what effected a reconciliation. And it was actually from that time on is when the church began to grow. My mission president knew of this reconciliation that was coming up and asked me if I didn't want to extend a couple of months. He even told me what was happening, and obviously I wanted to extend. So I served a 32-month mission. President Smith didn't really have good health, but at any rate, and of course he stayed in the mission home. He didn't come down to breakfast with the rest of us. He came down later. And I boldly went in and asked him, I said, while he was eating, "Can I have a picture with you?" He says, "Yes, you can have one without me if you wish."
You wanted somebody to take a picture of you?
Last time.
There aren't very many situations, for sure.
That was the beginning of the selfie.
Don't tell anyone, but I'm a high school dropout.
And the angles with it.
With a master's.
At any rate, the war had started. I was working as a mechanic's helper on the railroad.
I don't mean to be funny. Which war? World War I? Are we talking?
Anyway, I was figuring I'd just have to go to the war. I was anticipating my 18th birthday, hoping to sign up and, if possible, take pilot's training. In '42, for whatever reason I do not have an idea, the folks moved back to Colonia Pacheco. In about January or March, my mother came back out, and she said, "I've spoken to the stake president about you going on a mission." Of course, that was totally unexpected and unknown, but I've always been church-oriented, so I said, okay. That meant then that I had to get out of the country before I was 18. That's what I did. I got out of the States, came to the colonies. Our stake conference was about the middle of April, as I recall. And back then, there were few enough stakes that you always had a general authority visitor. In this particular case, it happened to be Clifford E. Young, who was of the 70. He's the one that interviewed me. A couple of weeks later, I received my call, said that I'd have to wait until the next conference. Again, the stake president didn't set you apart. The visiting authority did. The visitor that time, the general authority visitor that time, was Marion G. Romney. And it was his first trip back to the colonies since the Exodus. Anyway, so he's the one that ordained me an elder and set me apart from a mission. I was church-oriented, but no, mission wasn't part of our family heritage, I'll put it that way.
Right.
Grandpa Haynie served a mission with 3/4 of his children born.
Patrick Calhoun.
No, about half of them.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He went on his mission about 2 months after Lynn was born, son of his first wife, and about 2 months before my father was born. And he went back to his home country of South Carolina.
But
Sure.
first he went to Texas.
Served in Texas.
No.
Served in Sherman, Texas, and then he went to the southern states.
Yes. And
was it Sherman? There was one of the towns in Texas where he brushed off the dust of his feet against that town, and he said he'll never do that. He'd never do that again. Later in life, he said he'd never do that again because of what happened. So I went to Wikipedia to see what happened. Right after he left, huge tornado came through town and destroyed the town.
Do you have any memories of your great-grandfather, Robert Baskin?
Oh no. As a matter of fact, he had served in the Civil War and had died. He had problems.
But rheumatic fever, and the rheumatic fever and measles killed more people during the Civil War than actual gunshot wounds.
In a place called Haywood Valley is where
Georgia.
John Morgan converted a group of people, among whom was Patrick Calhoun was the first, but his mother and some of his siblings converted.
He was actually alive when the missionary came into town. He died that November, and Patrick Calhoun was baptized in February the next year. He was in the Haywood Valley. He probably heard the gospel preached, but he died in November.
John Morgan later got a group of saints from that Haywood Valley, also some from Alabama, took them on the train to Pueblo, Colorado. Many of the folks found housing locally. Some of them pooled their money and built what they called the barracks. Calhoun, or that is, yes, Patrick Calhoun, married one of the girls there in the group, and they had one of those rooms in the barracks. His first wife was Cecilia Gage Bagwell Haynie. She lacked 9 days of being 14 years old. When spring broke, a group of them walked on from Pueblo into what they call San Luis Valley, central southern Colorado.
Amendment to that, they took the train to Garland, which was as far as it went at that point, and walked from there.
So here's Sandra with her great-grandpa. Did you know any of your 4 great-grandparents?
Oh, no.
So, no.
No.
They were all gone by the time you were born.
I knew my grandparents on both sides, but I didn't know the greats. Patrick Calhoun, I don't know particularly how he was, but when I got younger, but when I got to know him, was in that period between the period after they had served their 3 years mission in the Mesa Temple. He came back, but he was sick, and he used to kind of sit around out in front, but he didn't interact with us children, and I just saw him. I really never did interact with him. I later interacted with Grandma somewhat, so I got to know her, but I didn't really get to know him. My grandfather was a polygamist, but I had no sense of polygamy.
But just here in the
But
college,
you
there
know,
was
I knew a lot of them, but that wasn't even part of my life. I knew the kids. We ran together, we played together, we, and farmed together and ate together, Christmas, Thanksgiving dinners and Sundays and everything, but it didn't mean, polygamy didn't mean.
You're really one generation.
Just think of Dad and Aunt Marie, and when they were born in Chaco, they had a wood stove that they cooked on. Ironing was done with an iron heated on that wood stove.
And we heated the water.
Baths were taken once a week
Tubs.
in a number 3, I think you called it.
Yes.
A number 3 galvanized tub. That was a
In the
round
kitchen,
tub.
yeah.
And they had to heat the water on the stove they had to draw the water from the well in front of the house, heat it on the stove, and pour it in there, a bucket at a time into this wash tub. And then all the kids would take a bath, on Saturday, the dramatic difference between, when Dad was 5 years old and the way my 5-year-old grandchildren experienced the world.
You mean this?
There still is.
I mean
There still is
everything.
power
The
in
water, the
Colonia
power, the
Pacheco.
food, the transportation, the information,
Part of that too is
is incredible.
how, where you live.
The system is set up. And for us being the second floor and 2 here on the first floor, we also have our library upstairs, which I know I've been told by people who have visited, it's been a science lab, it's been a gym, it's been a church.
Yeah, that's where we attended church.
In Deseret, sweet peaceful land, on Zion.